He taught me so much about the local market, so much about appraisal, so much about valuation, so much about myself. Folks, that's what it's all about, education. It's not just about the experience of appraising. It's about education. It's about not only doing the required education, but finding opportunities to educate yourself on a bigger basis.
Originating from deep inside the Rocky Mountains, transported through the power of the internet, and arriving inside your tiny earbuds. It's the Appraiser Coach Podcast, helping appraisers increase their efficiency, quality, and make more money. Here's the guy who makes it his life's mission to create value for real estate appraisers nationwide. Your host and the Appraiser Coach, Dustin Harris.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the program. Dustin Harris hanging out once again in the podcast chair. Had a recent experience over in Europe that wanted to share with you some lessons learned. Lessons learned, what can these lessons teach us about the appraisal business and about appraisers in general? I want to pause here, of course, to remind you, we are sponsored by three great companies, one of them being A La Mode Software, folks. I've been using it for over 20 years. I will continue to use it. It's a great, great software. Check them out. Go to alamode.com, or you can call them 800-ALA-MODE. Sponsored by DataMaster. I'm on the phone constantly with Rick and the team there at DataMaster. I tell you, folks, these guys bend over backward to make sure that their product is what appraisers truly need and will use and will bring value into their lives and their businesses. Check them out by going to datamasterusa.com. One more time, it's datamasterusa.com. And finally, sponsored by OREP Insurance. OREP, of course, is the E&O that I continue to use. I've been using them for several years now, and they continue to bring me great value for the best price out there, really. Check them out. Go to orep.org. That's OREP.org. Okay. First of all, I am self-aware enough to know how how it sounds when I say, let me tell you about my trip to Europe. Trust me, folks, we went on the cheap. We were not living high on the hog, so let's just get that out of the way right now. However, that being said, I was able to recently spend a couple weeks in France and Italy with my wonderful family. My wife and I decided we would take our two youngest sons, the ones that are still in the house, 11-year-old, 14-year-old, and we traveled to Europe. In hindsight, I think taking the boys was probably a mistake. I think my wife would probably agree with that. There's just so many museums that just cannot be appreciated by an 11 and a 14-year-old, frankly. So note to self, when you go to these types of places, leave the kids at home. When you go to the places like Disneyland, that's probably the places to take the kids. Nevertheless, I don't regret that we took them. It was a wonderful time. We had a great time. I've been telling people when they ask about the vacation, and I use air quotes. You can't see them, but I'm using air quotes when I say that word, that there were more missteps than there were steps. And that's part of the program today. And sharing with you some of the things that occurred, some of the things that happened, and what lessons could be learned for both appraisers and appraisal business owners. All right. So let's jump through these. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. I think 6 lessons learned, maybe 7, 8. I'm still counting. It keeps going. Okay, so about eight lessons learned that I think can be applied, should be applied to the appraisal business. You ready? Buckle in. Here we go. Lesson number 1: educate yourself. Okay. I don't know how many of you have been to Europe, but if you have not, if you're planning on maybe jumping across the pond in the near future, I would recommend a man that you probably know, you've probably heard, you've probably seen. Some of you have maybe read his books, watched his programs, but Rick Steves was our guide from afar, if you will, while we were over there, and it was absolutely wonderful. I cannot recommend his books enough. He makes it very, very easy to travel in Europe. He is the premier travel guide, travel author, if you will, for places across the pond. And we did a lot of research, read his books, did a lot of pre-research, I will call it, okay, before we went out there. The other thing I will tell you about is we were able to attend a day in Normandy. So we were based in Paris for most of our France side of the excursion, but we did rent a car and drive to Normandy at one point. And I'll tell you, I cannot imagine going to Normandy, to Omaha Beach, to Utah Beach, to Pointe du Hoc, to some of the St. Marguerite, some of these areas up there without a guide. I mean, yeah, it would be cool. And knowing a little bit about the history is great. By the way, I read D-Day by Stephen Ambrose before. In fact, I started it as we took off from Salt Lake City, and it's a 25-hour audiobook. I finished it before we got to Normandy, so it was fabulous to be able to have that fresh on my mind. Again, part of the education side of things. But when we got to Normandy, we hired a guy that lives there locally, former commando in the British Armed Forces. This guy was absolutely amazing. He knew not just what happened in every stop, but who died, their backstory, basically the section of ground that they died on. I mean, it made that place come alive. It was absolutely incredible. And I guess, if you're planning to go to Normandy, I would not do it without a guide. I wouldn't. Was it expensive? Yeah, about 400 euros if you include the tip. But we had him all day long. It was absolutely amazing. Well worth the money. And it was fabulous to spend some time with this individual. If you're interested, reach out to me privately. You can just email me, thecoach@theappraisercoach.com. I will give you his contact information if you're headed over that direction. Okay, so again, Rick Steves for the pre-planning, and the other story that I will tell you, of course, is the guide that we got in Normandy. Again, it was all about education. It was all about understanding. It was all about stretching our minds as well as our hearts when we were over there. What's the lesson? Folks, education is huge. And I'm not just talking about pre-education. When I talk about pre-education, I'm talking about the education that you received to become a real estate appraiser. I remember years ago, the first couple classes that I took, and I was very overwhelmed. I grew up in an appraisal home. I knew nothing. The first USPAP class I took, I thought I should run for the door. I was so lost, overwhelmed, felt like a kindergartner in a college class. But I'll tell you, education is not just about the required, whether it be the licensing education or the Con Ed that we will do. But folks, education along the way. And, the lesson I learned about this particular guide in Normandy reminds me to remind each of us as appraisers that we need to look to experts, both in the appraisal industry and outside. I think we sometimes get a little cynical when it comes to real estate agents, when it comes to lenders, when it comes to other appraisers. But folks, there are a handful of really decent people out there in your local market that it would behoove you. That's kind of an English term. I think it would behoove you to get to know them and to learn from them. When I was first starting out as an appraiser, I didn't just have my dad, who was my official mentor, but I had others who I surrounded myself with as well. One guy individually, I've told you about before, who is just, he's passed now, but his name was Gary, and he lived in my local market, and on a regular basis, I would go buy a Coke, and I would walk into his office, and I would put the Coke on the desk, and I would sit down, and an hour and a half, 2.5 hours, 3 hours later, I would walk out. This guy was amazing, and he taught me so much about the local market, so much about appraisal, so much about valuation, so much about myself. Folks, that's what it's all about, education. It's not just about the experience of appraising. It's about education. It's about not only doing the required education, but finding opportunities to educate yourself on a bigger basis. Every single year, I do my continuing ed plus. And when I say plus, I mean there are classes that I take, there are places that I go, there are conventions that I attend, even online education that I do that does not count even one iota toward my appraisal business license. Not one. But I don't do it for that. I do it for the education itself. So lesson number 1, educate yourself, both in the required and the non-required education. Okay, lesson number two, at least try to understand the locals, okay? So this is something, again, hat tip to Rick Steves. This is one of the things that he taught my wife and kids and I as we were headed over. We were a little bit worried about the language gap. You know, there's a lot of people over in Europe that do speak English. I would say the majority of people do speak at least some English. But we're going to countries where the primary language is not English. And, obviously we're in France, they're going to speak French. And obviously we're in Italy and they're going to be speaking Italian. And one of the things that Rick Steve says is, hey, yeah, you can get along and not know one bit of French or Italian. You can go on these trips. Most of the time that you spend will be in touristy sections, and most of the people there, because they want to make money, they want to talk to the tourists, right? They will speak English, at least to some level. However, one of the things that Rick Steves encourages is that you learn a few phrases in each language. And the reason for that is if you walk up to somebody and you say, hello, do you speak English? They might give you the cold shoulder, and they might not be as helpful as if they at least can see that you're trying. Okay. So it's one thing to say, do you speak English? Okay. But it's another thing to say, le parle anglais. Now, I'm sure I slaughtered that. I'm sure I slaughtered it for a whole week while I was there in Italy. But nonetheless, the fact that I was trying, okay, and this is what Rick teaches, the fact that you're trying to fit in with the locals shows them that at least you care, okay? When you walk up to somebody, it's one thing to say hello, okay, in English. Do you speak English? It's a whole other thing to say ciao, le parle anglais. And they at least say, well, I speak a little. And then you can carry on this conversation. It's another thing if you say, hey, do you speak English? And obviously if they don't, they're not going to understand what you're saying. But it's trying to communicate the fact that you are trying to get on their level. Does that make sense? There's a difference between saying hello and saying bonjour. And by the way, they say bonjour all the time in France, right? That's how you greet. Parlez-vous anglais? That's how we would ask. And again, I know some of you speak French, and I'm embarrassed that you're probably saying, "Oh, Dustin, really? Is that how you did it?" But I'll tell you, it worked. The fact that I was trying and they could kind of understand what I was saying and that I said it in their language went a long way to be able to fit in with the locals, and we were able to get along just fine. There were several situations, and one of them I will tell you about in just a bit, where it really would have helped to know the language, but for the most part, we were able to get along just fine, okay? So fit in with the locals. Let me share with you a couple of things that I do. Now, this first one is not purposeful, but it can't hurt, okay? I as you know, appraise in an area called Jackson Hole, Wyoming. There's a lot of beatniks there. There's a lot of people in touch with the land, if you will. And I drive a Subaru. It does not hurt that I drive a Subaru. Now, I did not buy the Subaru so I would fit in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, but I do fit in Jackson Hole, Wyoming because I drive a Subaru. You see where I'm getting with this? Okay. It's important to fit in as best you can. I'm not saying that you do things just to fit in. Okay. I'm saying take advantage of those opportunities that allow you to be able to connect with the locals. When I say locals, and some of you are saying, well, Dustin, I am a local. Well, great. That's wonderful. Some of you are, some of you are not. Some of you cover areas that you're not necessarily living in. And that's a whole other podcast, right? A podcast that we've had multiple times. Okay. But the point here, the lesson learned here is as you connect with locals, as you connect with those that you work alongside, you're going to have a better time being able to reach them and being able to touch them and being able to do business with them. Okay. One of the things that I love to do when I'm in an appraisal inspection is not just connect on a business side, but also connect on a personal side and befriend those that I serve. I'm in their home. I'm intrusive, if you will. I'm in their private domain, and it's not just all business. Now, I'm a professional. Don't get me wrong. And I think it's super important that, especially in their domain, that we are professional in what we do. That being said, I do like to say, for example, I often say, hey, are you native to the area? That simple question opens up a plethora of opportunity to be able to talk to them. Now, some people are closed. Some people don't want to reach out, and they might give me a very short condensed, get off my back answer. That's very rare, by the way, but I can sense that when that happens. But most people are like, no, we're from Kentucky and we moved back here, 6 years ago, and and it opens up dialogue and you're able to befriend. So lesson number 2 in our trip across the pond was at least try to connect with and understand the locals. All right. Lesson number 3. Be flexible. Now, this is something that I actually sat down and talked to my family about when we were taking off, when we were ready to board the plane. I said, now listen, we've got all of this stuff planned out. I educated myself. I've planned out everything to the T from this hour to this hour, we're going to be doing this. And from this day to this day, we're going to be doing this. And we're going to pick up the rental car here and we're going to drive it here. And it's going to cost us X amount and blah, blah, blah. But it does not matter how well you plan. Trips are not about plans. They will go awry. Again, I started this podcast letting you know that we had more missteps than we had steps. And I tell you, on a daily basis, we had not just minor things happen, but major things happen to us. Things that made things go completely awry, things that changed the entire day, things that required a lot of flexibility. Okay, let me give you an example of one of the times that I wish I knew a little bit more French. Okay, we were in Paris. We were headed to a B&B, a bed and breakfast, if you will, and we had all of our luggage with us. It was late at night. I think it was about 9:30 at night, and we were running to the train, and we got to the platform, and the beeper started going off, the buzzer, okay? And that buzzer basically means, hey, watch out, the door's closing. You only got a few seconds. So, we didn't want to wait for the next train, so we ran onto this train. We jumped on this train, and a couple things happened all at once. I noticed there was an announcement being made in French. Okay, there's number 1. Didn't understand a word of it. Number 2, we were the only ones on the train. That was very unusual. In most cases, when we got on trains, it was like we had to push people out of the way to get on the train, literally, to get on pretty much any train we got on. Very, very busy. The metro system over there, very, very packed all the time. And number 3, we look up, and the people that are sitting on the platform are waving us off like, what the hell are you guys doing, kind of a thing. And so all of this is happening at once. We're all processing this. We're looking at each other. We're looking at them. We're saying, there's nobody on this train. Oh, all of a sudden it hits us. We shouldn't be on this train. By the time it hit us, when we started to move toward the door, it was too late. The doors closed. We were on this train. I tried to hit the button to open the door. Wouldn't work. The train takes off. But it doesn't take off like a normal train. Normally, the trains just kind of speed from one stop to another, right? Not this one. No, it crept along, and about 5 seconds into the journey, all the lights went off. And I thought, you're kidding me, right? I mean, it's all hitting me what's going on. This train is done for the night. And that's why nobody was getting on. That's why they were waving us off. They were like, do you not hear the announcement in French? No, we heard it. We just didn't understand it, right? And about 10 minutes later, we ended up in what I call the train yard graveyard, where the train had stopped for the night, and they were done, man. And we were done too. The lights were off. The doors wouldn't open. We're sitting there, and I'm thinking, okay, it's 30 degrees Fahrenheit outside. We're spending the night in this train. Now, my lovely wife, who is very resourceful, did find an emergency exit. We were able to get off the train. We looked both ways before we leaped. We started headed across the tracks trying to find. My goal was get out of the train graveyard and call an Uber. I mean, that's what I'm going to do at this point, right? So we're headed across the tracks. The next thing you know, the engineer comes out, and I'll make a long story short. He helped us get to where we need to go. And he was a little freaked out that we were, 4 people wandering across the train tracks at 9:30 at night. Be flexible, folks. Another situation that we had was coming home. We were supposed to fly from Paris to San Francisco, which is a 12-hour flight, by the way. Very fun. And we ended up sitting on the tarmac for 7 hours. They finally canceled the flight after us sitting on the tarmac for 7 hours. Yes, 7 hours on the tarmac. I'm not exaggerating. I am a bit. It was about 6 hours and 35 minutes. Okay. Wasn't fun. Not fun at all. But we made it. And the next day we flew out rather than that day. But lesson number 3, you got to be flexible. Now I know what you're asking. What does 7 hours on a tarmac and a few minutes in a train graveyard have to do with the appraisal business? Well, again, the lesson here is to be flexible and to go into things being flexible. I'm a very planned person, okay? It drives the people around me batty. I'm very planned out. I'm very minute to minute. I don't do a lot of things spontaneously, though I don't mind spontaneous. I really don't. I enjoy a spontaneous excursion and a spontaneous situation, but for the most part, especially when it comes to travel, I like to have things planned out. That being said, one of the lessons that I taught my family before we left is I said, the things that we're going to remember are the things that are going to go not the way we planned them. And that, when you ask my kids how their trip to Europe is, guess what? They tell about the time when they got on the train and everything was closed. They talk about being on the plane for 7 hours on the tarmac and not going anywhere. Those are the things they remember. They don't remember the David in Florence, right? Well, they do, but that's not what they talk about. They talk about the things that went not right. In our own business, we have these experiences on a regular basis, folks. You've been there. I've been there. The appointment's at 2:00 this afternoon. You show up and the borrower's not there, right? What do? Well, you can freak out. You can get mad. You can stomp up and down. You can complain. You can call your client and demand a trip fee. By the way, I wouldn't say you shouldn't do that. But part of this is just going with the flow. Part of this is just saying, you know what? Things are not always going to turn out the way that we want them to turn out. Okay. The other thing that comes to mind is, we might get out to a property and think we have everything planned and we've got comps chosen and we may have half the adjustments done on our report before we even show up. Then we realize we get out there and, oh boy, this is not the highest and best use that I thought it was going to be. Right. Again, you can get upset, you can get mad, or you can go with the flow. I'm telling you, you will have a better vacation and you will run a better business if you're able to be flexible in what you do. All right. Lesson number 4, if you need help, ask for it. Couple stories come to mind on this one. We were in Rome, and we were headed to the Vatican for the day. We were going to visit the museums and the Sistine Chapel and the Basilica and all that. It's a little confusing in Rome. We were actually within walking distance from our hotel to the Vatican. We ended up taking a metro just because we were running a little bit late that day. But it was a very short ride, maybe 5 minutes we were there. We got off. We had no clue. I was trying to use my GPS. GPS doesn't work really well when you're in the midst of a big city, I found. Lots of tall buildings, lots of interruptions, disruptions. It's very, very hard to know which direction you're walking. We're looking like a bunch of idiots. And thankfully, there were locals there helping us out and saying, Vatican? Yeah, how could you tell? And they were pointing us in the right direction. It was great. Okay. Similar situation with the David. Speaking of the David, we were in Florence. We parked our car in a garage in the historic district, by the way. And we basically parked between, if those of you who have been to Florence know that you've got the Accademia, I can't remember how you say it, where the David is housed. And then you've got the Dumos. And they're basically, down a long road from each other. We actually parked on that road halfway between, but I didn't know which way to go. We got out and the individual did not speak any English that was parking my car, but I was able to say the David, he got that part and he pointed us in the right direction, right? Don't be proud. You got to ask for directions when you're in Europe, okay? Again, I look back on my situation with my appraisal business. I told you about my mentors when I got into this, but it's not just about official or even unofficial mentors, okay? Be willing to ask for help. One of the great things about our profession now that has not been around in the past is Facebook, okay? And I know a lot of you are not fans of Facebook, and that's fine, but there are a lot of groups out there who are very, very helpful. One of the groups that I run, the All-Star Team group, is absolutely just top-notch, okay? Some of these other groups, they have their good, but they also have their struggles. There are a lot of complaints, a lot of negative people on some of these groups. You don't get that on the All-Star Team group. It is so awesome to be able, on a daily basis, 2 or 3 people are posting and saying, hey, got an unusual situation, you got a highest and best use issue, what would you guys do here? And instead of ridiculing, instead of making fun of, instead of saying, why would you ask such a stupid question? People are on there saying, hey, you know what, that's a great question. This is what I would do, or this is what I would do, or why don't you try this? And it's great, folks. If you need help, ask for help. I would even say, ask your local appraisers. Yeah, I know. How would it be to actually reach out and talk to an appraiser locally? How would it be to actually reach out and say, hey, peer, hey, colleague, what do you do in this situation? I think you would be shocked at how willing people are, yes, even your competitors, to help you out. Speaking of helping you out, I want to talk a little bit today about my sponsors. Every one of them has been a great, great blessing in my life, and I absolutely testify that they will be a great blessing in your life as well. The first one I'm going to talk about today is Alamode. Alamode, of course, is the software that I've been using for over 20 years, and there's a reason I use it. The reason I use it is because it helps me to do more with less. It helps me to be as efficient as I possibly can. Now, folks, it's not cheap, okay? But you get what you pay for. The value is absolutely amazing. The tools, okay? I guarantee I pay for my Alamode Plus every single month. Why? Because it pays me back. The time it saves me, it just doesn't make sense to go with anybody else. Check them out. Go to alamode.com or 800-ALAMODE. We are sponsored, of course, by DataMaster. Again, DataMaster is allowing appraisers to save 30 to 60 minutes per report. Folks, how many reports do you do during a week? How many reports do you do a month? How much do you get paid for an hours of your time? If you could save an hour, times that by the number of reports you're doing per month, okay? Do the math, folks. I'm telling you, in my mind, DataMaster pays for itself in the first couple of reports. If you do more than 5 reports a month, you're killing it. DatamasterUSA.com is where you go. Again, it's DatamasterUSA.com. Finally, we're sponsored by OREP Insurance. Speaking of saving money and speaking of giving value in return, OREP is all about it. Check them out. Go to orep.org. Folks, if you want the very best E&O out there, with the benefits that come, just go to their page, go to orep.org and look at the benefits, folks. If you have not done that process, I would highly encourage that you do. Again, it's orep.org, orep.org. All right, folks, welcome back. Today we're talking about lessons learned from a recent trip that my family and I took to France and Italy. By the way, big shout out to Rick. Rick is a good friend of mine, and he made this trip possible. So hat tip to Rick. Thank you. Who gave me some great tips on how to travel to Europe, and I can't thank him enough. All right, so back into it. Couple things, couple other lessons. I got 1, 2, 3, 4 more lessons I want to share with you. Okay, I'll make these quick. The lesson number 5 I'm going to bring up, and I'm just going to call it bring an umbrella, okay? The lesson is bring an umbrella. The principle is a little bit deeper than that, but, we went to Venice, poured cats and dogs when we were in Venice. Not always, not the whole day we were there. We were only there for about 4 or 5 hours. Yes, you can do Venice in 4 or 5 hours, but again, ask for help. The hotel that we stayed in, again, hat tip to Rick, gave us this tip. We stayed at the Best Western in the city just across the bridge there from Venice. And the lady at the front desk was so helpful. We said, listen, we've only got 4 hours to see Venice. She goes, oh, she pulls out this map. She says, hey, here's what you do. You get off here, you walk here, circle back here, go see this here, and then get on the boat and take the Grand Canal cruise and come back and you're done. And I'll tell you what, she could not be more spot on. It was awesome. But it rained, but we had umbrellas. One of the side trips that we took in Italy was to Pisa. We were not planning on going to Pisa, but it just so happened, speaking of the rain, we had a rained out day when we were going to do some horseback riding in Tuscany. Ended up not getting to do that. The kids were most looking forward to that, but unfortunately it was raining so hard we were unable to do so. So we punted and we did something different. And we got in the car and we drove to Pisa, and we were so glad we did. I don't think it was as good as it probably could have been to ride horses, but nonetheless, that wasn't an opportunity. It wasn't an option that we had. And so we went to Pisa, and I'll tell you what, it did not rain any time harder the whole time we were in Europe than it did that day. I mean, it was insane how much it rained that day in Pisa. But guess what? We had umbrellas. All right, what's the lesson learned? Folks, let me give you one example, okay? I have an extra disto in my car, all right? I don't have one disto in my car. I have 2 distos in my car. Why? Again, bring an umbrella. Number 2, I have a great office staff to rely on. They are my umbrella more days than you can count. I can't tell you how often. In fact, the whole time I was in Europe, they were just insanely cool, not bothering me, letting me spend time with family and be away from the business, if you will, and they simply took care of things. And I can't thank them enough. And I'm telling you, they are my umbrella every single day. There are some multiple lessons to be learned here. Okay, preparation, training, and reliance on others is a huge, huge thing. Okay, all right. Next lesson: if you need a break, take one. Okay, if you need a break, take one. Okay, let me tell you about an unplanned break that we took, that I took rather in Florence. I'm a little bit. I'm going to be a little bit vulnerable with you here. Okay. I don't think I've ever shared this publicly, but I will share it with you publicly today. I have an extreme fear of tight spaces. Okay, I have claustrophobia. Now I'm okay getting on an elevator. I've even gone spelunking in caves. Okay, I'm not insanely anxiety ridden when it comes to small spaces, but sometimes it hits me and it hits me hard. And, it goes back to, I was actually locked in a trunk for over an hour when I was a kid. No, it was not some weird, abuse situation. Well, it was, but it was my friends being stupid. And I don't remember. I was maybe 12, 13, and they thought it would be really funny to lock me in a trunk, not a car trunk, but a closed trunk. You know what I'm talking about? The 3 foot by 2 foot by 2.5 foot. Okay. I was bent over, fetal position in a trunk for over an hour. Horrible situation. And it comes back to me sometimes. And when I was, by the way, if you go to Florence, you got to go to the Dome. You got to go to the Duomo. And if you want, I think, recommend to most people to do the Dome tour, the climb of the Dome. Okay. The view from the top is absolutely insane and amazing. Hindsight for me, I would not do it again. Okay. I didn't tell you the other fear I have. I do have a fear of heights, not just heights, but I get this weird fear of my kids dying from a height, if that makes sense. I heard a story a long time ago about a father who was touring someplace with his, and I don't remember all the details, but it was a father and a 2.5-year-old, I remember, daughter was in front of him, and she slipped through the cracks of some high bridge or something like that and fell to her death. And he was right there, but he could not grab her fast enough and she fell through. I know, horrible, right? That sticks in my brain and it haunts me, right? And I have this fear that my kids will be doing something stupid and they'll play around on the rails or whatever and they'll end up, going over the edge. I don't know what, I mean, my kids are not dumb. They're fairly smart and resourceful, but nonetheless, I've got this fear, right? So combine those two fears, the fear of small places and the fear of heights, and the dome climb at the Duomo was not something I should have done, okay? Let's just say that most of the way up, 3/4 of the way up, in fact, I was almost to the top. It was more than 3/4 because it was the last flight of steps before you actually jump. And I didn't know that at the time, but I had it. I was done. I took a break. It was, those of you who have been know what I'm talking about. It is very, very claustrophobic. It is very confined. And when you combine that with a bunch of people and they send everybody at the same time, so every half hour they send people up, okay? And they send about 100, maybe 75, all up at once. And you got people in front of you, you got people behind you, and there's no turning back. There's no taking a break. You march up these stairs and you just keep going. And folks, I'm telling you, I loved the view, but I wouldn't have done it again. I started getting anxiety and started freaking out about the fact that I couldn't go forward, couldn't go backward. It happened when all of a sudden everybody stopped at one point because another crowd was coming down and they had to pass us. And I'm telling you, it was not fun. And I took an unplanned break. Let's just say I sat down with my head between my knees. Yes, I'm being very vulnerable here. And I took about a 10-minute break with lots of deep breaths before I was able to continue the hike to the top. Now, am I glad I did it? I guess. Would I do it again? Not a chance. Not a chance. Okay. I took an unplanned break. Okay. Keep that on the back burner. Second story here is, and I alluded to this earlier, is we purposefully, midway through our trip, planned 2 days on a Tuscany ranch, just northeast of Siena. And the purpose of that little excursion was to relax. And that's what we did. We had nothing planned other than horseback riding, which didn't go well. But we had nothing planned other than to just chill out, to do our laundry, to take a break, and just to be away from it all. Folks, when you take a 2-week vacation, I would highly recommend that you take a day or two in the middle to just chill. Take a vacation from your vacation, as they say. Okay. So what's the lesson here? First of all, let's talk about unplanned breaks. Okay. Taking advantage of unplanned breaks on a very regular basis. Things don't go as well as I would want them to go on my appointments. Okay. And this happens to all appraisers. You have things planned throughout the day. Maybe you've got 4 or 5 inspections that you're doing for the day. And on the third inspection, you show up, you're supposed to be there between 2 and 4. And guess what? The borrower's not there. What do? I'll tell you what I do. A lot of times I take a break. A lot of times I say, you know what? It is what it is. I call the borrower. Oh yeah, I forgot. I'm about 30 minutes out. Okay, great. I'm going to go take a lunch and I'll be back in about 30 minutes. And I do. I take my laptop wherever I go. I don't hardly ever pull it out during the day, but in cases like this, I'm glad I have it. I go find a local pizzeria or some kind of a diner that has Wi-Fi, and I set up my little computer and I do my work. It's an unplanned break, a break nonetheless. Okay. One of those planned breaks that you need to be thinking about on a regular basis, folks, is on it, not in it. Okay. That's ONII. OINII, on it, not in it. Okay. That's the time that you're spending on a weekly basis. And I hope you're all doing this, working on your business, not in your business. I hope you're taking breaks on a regular basis. Planned breaks, folks. You got your unplanned breaks like I did at the Dumos. You got your planned breaks like I did at the Tuscany Ranch. You've got your unplanned breaks, which happen when the borrower doesn't show up. And you've got your planned breaks, which I hope you're putting on your calendar. And that is you're on it, not in it. All right. Next story. Never hurts to have a little money on hand. All right. I'm going to make these stories very, very quick. We took a flight from Paris to Rome and then back from Rome to Paris so we could fly out back home. I'm cheap, as I mentioned at the beginning of this podcast, and I found the cheapest flights I could. I think they were like 65 euros round trip to go from Paris to Rome. We ended up spending over 300 euros. I'll just make a long story short. These cheap airlines, they get you, okay? Unless you know all their tricks, they will charge you for everything. Okay. It didn't hurt to have a little money on hand in order to take care of that so we could still make our flight. Rental cars. In both cases, we rented 2 different rental cars. Again, I'm cheap. I'm trying to go with the best economy. Ended up that our luggage and our body situation did not fit the cars that I had rented. In both cases, we needed to do an upgrade. We did that. Again, great to have a little money on hand. How does this relate to the appraisal business? Every single year, we have a slowdown. This year has been a little bit different than past years, but for the most part, from about Thanksgiving to about Valentine's Day, we have a slowdown. Folks, I have what I call a January fund, and I put money into that fund all year long because I know the slowdown is coming. Okay, do you have that fund? I also have an emergency fund. It's not just a slowdown fund. It's hey, something went terribly wrong, and we've got to make a payment that we didn't anticipate. Okay. Recently, I had a severance payment to make that I didn't plan on. Was completely out of the blue for me. Luckily, I had the money there that I could do that and help that individual along at least a little bit. Okay, so have a little money on hand. It never hurts to have a little money on hand. Okay, finally, the biggest lesson learned in the last couple of weeks of traveling is to have fun. Okay, have fun. Let me tell you about 2 quick examples. First of all, we were in Paris. It was our last day in Paris before we were headed the next morning to Rome. And we had not had a really good French meal yet. And so we decided we were going to spend a little bit of money this time rather than just eating at these local, corner shops that we spent most of our time in. We were going to have a sit-down French dinner. Now, I didn't go, hog wild. I did a little Yelping and a little Googling and found a French restaurant that was near the Arc de Triomphe. And we were able to walk to it actually from the Arc de Triomphe. And it was amazing. It was great. And it wasn't that expensive. It was absolutely amazing. It's one of the greatest memories we have of our trip is creme brulee in a nice little Paris restaurant. It was really, really fun. Another story I'll tell you goes back to Florence. We were in Florence. We had already done the David. We had already done the Dome. And then we had gone down the road to a really great pizza restaurant. Had some really good pizza. We were coming back. It was late at night, and we still had quite a drive to make before we were done that day. We were not actually staying in Florence. We had to get in the rental car and take a drive. But nonetheless, we were walking down the road and there was some music playing, and we walked past this music and there's this guy, probably in his 60s, I would guess, and he is dancing to this music. Man, I wish I'd got a video of it. It was funny on one hand, but it was actually just inspiring. Here's this old guy, and obviously a local, not a tourist, and he's out there dancing to this music, and he is just free as a bird, arms flailing, light as a feather, dancing in the street, and everybody's looking at him like, dude, that is the life. And I thought, you know what, have fun. So I danced with him. I went out there and danced, and my kids started dancing, and we just had a great time dancing there in the street of Florence. Even though we were in a hurry to get home, we were tired. We let down our hair. And those of you who know me, those of you who've seen me know that that's being, rhetorical. We let down our hair and we had a little fun. Okay. All right. What's the lesson for appraisers? Folks, I don't know what those stories mean to you, but I hope you're enjoying your job. I really do. I really hope you're enjoying your job. What does that mean to you? I don't know. But I'll tell you, I still love appraising after all these years. I really do. I really enjoy what I do, and I hope you do as well. I hope you find opportunity to enjoy your job. Folks, if you don't know what I mean, go to YouTube, type in The Appraiser Coach, and type in inspect a vacant house, okay? Go to YouTube, type in The Appraiser Coach, inspect a vacant house. You'll get an idea what I mean about having fun when we do our appraisals. Okay, that's it, folks. With that episode, I am confident I can now write off my entire Europe vacation as, quote, research. So thank you for the indulgence today. Hopefully you've learned a few things. Hopefully it's been a good reminder of some great things that we as appraisers and business owners need to remember, some wonderful life lessons, if you will, learned from a couple weeks over in Europe. Again, if you're interested in a trip over there and want some advice, reach out to me, the coach at theappraisercoach.com. Would love to help where I can. I love creating value for other people, including my all-star team, as we mentioned earlier. Folks, I hope you will join me. It's $9 a month, folks, and I'll tell you, it is a great community of between 100 and 200 members who are just there to help each other out. Okay, if you want colleagues, if you want to be able to rub shoulders with other appraisers who are all about helping you to be a better person, a better business owner, and a better appraiser, I hope you will join my all-star team. Check it out. Go to theappraisercoach.com/memberships. Again, it's appraisercoach.com/memberships.
You've been listening to the Appraiser Coach podcast with Dustin Harris. If you like what you hear, please give us a 5-star rating and post a short review on iTunes. For more in-depth insider information on how you can make more money as a real estate appraiser, visit theappraisercoach.com and sign up for the All-Star team today. Thanks for joining us. And now, get out there and create some value.